Hello, hello, dear listeners. Let's talk getting unstuck. So, here's what's going to happen in this week's episode. I'm going to share with you two stories and a memory. And the first story is fresh from a client engagement where I have guided someone through just like this beautiful process of them letting things go, shifting things up, getting unstuck. The second is to share a very real, fresh example of where I have felt stuck and how I took myself out of it, and then a memory that connects into that. So, that is what I'm going to share with you today. How does that connect into designing yourself? Well, as you are out there setting your visions, leading with intention, acting on purpose, really leading with what you want in the present, I know that we can find ourselves feeling stuck. So it is my strong hope and belief that what you will walk away with from hearing these stories, from hearing this memory, is some inspiration and some things, parallels that you can draw into your own experience for how you can get yourself unstuck. And here's the reality: getting unstuck, excuse me, here's the reality: getting stuck is going to happen. Absolutely, it's going to happen. Sometimes it happens because we're unclear on where we want to go. And so we're just kind of stuck, unsure, what are we moving towards? What do we want? What does the future hold? I don't know, right? We're stuck. What is the pathway for growth? Other times, the getting the feeling of being stuck is really coming from, well, I know what I want, or I have a real sense. Maybe it's not crystal clear, maybe not all the details. There can be varying degrees of what you can see, but you feel called to something, maybe with a level of clarity. However, you don't know how to move towards it. How do I take that action? That's going to happen to all of us again and again and again as we sit in our growth edge of always asking, but what else? And what now? Does it still resonate? And as we stay in that space of learning and growing into ourselves, realizing our fullest potential, stuckness is just a natural byproduct. And so the question becomes, how quickly can I move out of it? How quickly can I identify it? Can I get comfortable in the discomfort of sitting there and acknowledging it such that I can move out of it? Those are interesting questions that I like to cozy up to. And I hope in today's podcast, you too will like to cozy up to it. Now, before I go straight into my two stories and a memory, I wanted to give an update for all of you who've been on the edge of your seat from last week's podcast on embodying a beginner's mindset, where I invited you to think about what kind of new body practice might you try out so that you could both be a learner and be a learner in your body. And I had shared that one of the places that I'm practicing embodying a beginner's mindset right now in this season of life is skiing. And I just wanted to celebrate that this past weekend, as I said I would in the podcast, I went out to the slopes. I said, okay, my learning objective is let go, let go and go fast. Like, don't hold back. And I I sat at the top of hills that I would have wanted to just zigzag down and really slow myself, use my edges, do my S curves, practice the techniques to go slow. And this past weekend, I sat and I was like, okay, it's shallow enough. There's something that's going to catch me at the end. I can just go and go fast, like go straight down. And I did. And I did it. And I lived to tell the tale, which was thrilling. Um, a little less exciting, but noteworthy, is that I also made it down my first section of a black trail for those of you non-skiers, this means it was steeper than what I've ever gone down before. So says the mountain I was on. And what I wanted to say is from an achievement perspective, one might say, "Whoa, going down a black, that's better. That's a higher outcome, higher performance." And it was good. It was a good pushing for me to do that. However, I didn't let go the same way on that black. I actually had my husband film me from the bottom. Perhaps I'll release this footage somewhere. Stay tuned. But that what I can tell you is that it was much choppier. I was afraid to let go. It was steeper. And it was in a way, there was a little bit of mindset and also a lot of like just technically like how do I maneuver what I know how to do on this steeper descent. Anyway, so this is the point. Like it's when you're embodying a beginner's mindset, it's not about the achievement. I went down the black. It's about am I moving on the learning objective that's showing up in my body? And in that instance, this past weekend it was all about letting go. So I did go back down another steep section. It was a steeper blue. It was the blue that led into this section of black trail that I had done. So I did that part a second time, and I did let go more, and I practiced like, okay, I'm going to make a different kind of S curve and allow myself to descend more and use the full width of the mountain. So I was learning, and I did let go, and I went faster. And I think it's translating in other parts of my life because also big celebrations for me. Any of you Peloton riders out there? I am a person. I came to Peloton late, not until 2022, beginning of 2022. So late, all of you pandemic Peloton riders. But I love my Peloton. And I PR'd twice this week. So just speaking of going fast and pushing. So me and Robin Arzone, Robin and Allie Love, those are my ladies on the Peloton. And I'll link the Peloton ride that I did with Robin just most recently where I PR'd my 45-minute PR. The other PR I had was my 30-minute PR this week. Anyway, it was just an example of like letting go. I'm in my body. I'm going fast. And I was like, oh, it's showing up other places. What other places might it be showing up? Stay tuned. More to come. Now, how does all of that connect into getting unstuck? Well, when we're in our bodies, it allows us to let go and get unstuck. And so if you haven't already set what's that body practice you're going to be in, this is your invitation. Go back to last week's podcast, pick what your body practice is, see how it might help you get unstuck. But let me tell you story number one. So, story number one, let me give you the headlines of the engagement that I have been in with this client. So, this is a senior leader, and they are in an amazing mission driven organization who was investing in this person to go out and become an even stronger leader. And this was really investment based coaching, where this organization said, we care about this person. We think this person is stellar, and we want to invest in them to grow into their best self. Great, beautiful. And when they came to me and said, I'd like to know about what coaching could look like, this is what I'm trying to do, um, I asked a lot of questions, as I do, and guided them that we would go through a part training and developmental learning experience and part coaching. And it's through a core engagement that I offer called vision coaching. So I was guiding this person to really see what it is that they want, connect that to the story of where they're coming from, and create a roadmap for how they can both see from where they are in the present to where they want to get to. Like, how do they move there such that they can drop back into the present and say, what do I do now? Now, beautiful. No stuckness, right? We're just going to go through this process, no issues. Remember what I said about stuckness is a natural result? It is. And one of the core places of stuckness that was showing up for this individual was which vision was lead. And it's very normal that you might have a vision of your career, and at the same time, maybe a vision of a transition that you're in your career. You might also have a vision of home, of family, of a relationship. So there can be many visions that can coexist together. But sometimes there's this real question of, but which one's lead? Which one am I going to pay attention to? And that can often boil down to, is my lead vision something related to work, a vision of my business, a vision of the next role that I want, a vision of my leadership? So some kind of professional vision, and competing with a personal or whole life vision. And that might be a vision of self, like what do I want, me, myself, versus what do I want for my job or my career or my business. It might be it might be I'm looking for a vision of my whole life. So not just about myself, but how everything fits together, my family, my home, my work. I want to know my whole life, but also there's something very specific that I want in my professional life to see. So it's not unusual that when I'm guiding someone through vision coaching, that we are sussing out which one is the lead. Now, in this particular instance, uh, we walked a path with both of them. And it started where we came into the experience thinking we're going to really focus in on professional. However, life kept showing up. It's like, but there's something that I want for my family about where we live, and maybe there's a move. And, and, and then coming in, I said, okay, well, maybe we want to like clear space. Let's look at this. Uh, but then came back to, but actually like a part of where I want to live and where and what I want to offer for my family and my life is how can I have a job? Like what will that look like if we move somewhere else? And I'm trying to think about, what about me professionally and what does that look like in my leadership? And so we danced between the two. And so the way that we moved through this stuckness of which one first is we honored that both were there. And I did bring a discipline of focus that in our live sessions we picked one to focus on, and we might have a little bit of airspace to say, okay, and how do you take the lessons learned and think about it here? How will you move it forward on your own, and what will you share back with me? But let's focus on one versus spreading thin across both. And what I wanted to celebrate is that at the end of this experience, this individual had created a roadmap for themselves that laid out both. And there was such clarity of where they were headed professionally. We came back there, and there were some surprises in it, like real shifts in point of view and getting over resistance that had been felt because we stayed the course and we dropped in and we went deeper. We didn't sit at the surface. And so this person has a clear direction on how they want to grow in their leadership, and a sense of how they are already doing it. Beautiful. At the same time, they were processing, and how does this play out? The same tools and process I went through for my personal life. And they have not an answer, but they have a way to move in the present that they didn't have before, in this case with a partner, on how will we decide together what we want next and for our whole life together as a family. And how can we drop in, and rather than asking the big question, in this case, where do where do we want to live? Because they're really clear they're calling in a shift. So instead of asking that big unanswerable question, they're asking a deeper question that sits beneath it, and getting to different things like, well, what would schools look like if we moved here or here? Who can help us answer questions about what the experience will look like for our kids? What kind of home could we afford? How would we travel to other places that are important to us where we have family if we move to these various places? So these are all things that they can drop into and get unstuck on because they're dropping in. So I wanted to celebrate that, just watching someone go through the unfolding of this process, holding both, and and to offer that though the focus was on how do I see these visions and connect them to my story and see how I can lead in the present, a real shift was in mindsets. And one of the big ones was something that I believe in my core, and it's that this person now can really embody and hold the belief that if I focus on myself, the rest will follow. And this was for a person who spent a lot of time paying attention to other people and then finding like, I'm not sure, I'm so attuned to what my clients needs, or I'm so attuned to what my team needs, but then they seem to be getting upset with me and it's because they couldn't articulate for themselves what they wanted for the client, what they wanted for the team. And so there would be this dissonance that was happening because this leader was so focused on everyone else, and that you can imagine how that might play out in family life too. So yes, there's clearer visions and there's roadmaps and ways of being. But what underpins all of that are many small tweaks that have huge impact in mindset. Like, for example, shifting from it's really important that I focus on other people's needs first to seeing the power of if I focus on myself first, the rest will follow. So, getting unstuck, sticking with the process, holding the focus, shifting the mindsets, letting the transformation unfold. Whew, beautiful. Love it. Great. That's story number one. Story number two, friends, let me tell you about my stuckness this week. So I am going through a gardening intensive. It is with a community that I love to be a part of, with the Fresh Exchange. I will link to them in the show notes. And it's all about gardening all the time. And I find that the people, the process, just aligns so much with who I am as a human being. And really the way that you plan a garden is also the way that you plan work and life. And so there's a lot of overlap. But the domain is very different than what I focus on here on this podcast and uh, in my professional life, because the primary focus is hands in the dirt. What are you growing? Um, as opposed to hand on your heart, what are you growing, which is more my domain. So anyway, in this gardening intensive that Megan Gilger of the Fresh Exchange, um, the gardening intensive is helping us see in this month of February what is our vision for our gardens this season. Because believe it or not, this is the time to be thinking about it and readying things to get started. So I went through the first week of the intensive and felt very clear. I was like, oh, I feel it's lovely. I feel supported and surrounded, and I can see like what are my lessons from the garden in years past? What's the feeling I want to have in my garden? And I could really see it. Then I got to week two, and it was like, create the plan. Now, I also had some personal things like COVID running through our house for the first time, which was not great. And also having everyone's fine, but it was exhausting. And then having, in addition to just feeling routine was off, physically feeling out of sorts, then looking at, okay, well, I knew where I'm coming from in the garden, and I know the feeling I want to have. However, putting it into a plan, like it felt, I was suddenly like freezing up with, okay, well, I know I want to have this magical feeling and to create, and I'm picturing all these trees, and there's the ash borer beetle that's decimated ash trees all over our property and the country. Um, and so there were a lot of dead trees. We went through construction. There's just so much replenishing of the land that's happening. And I was like, there's all these big things that I want to invest in, but I don't want to get it wrong. Limiting mindset belief. I'm worried about investing in something and then having it that's a bigger investment in the garden. It's not like a packet of seeds, no problem. Even some plugs, no problem. But when you're talking about like hundreds of dollars per tree and you need many of them, like suddenly I'm thinking, but I don't want to just waste these trees. Like I don't want to waste the money because I haven't thought about where they're going to thrive. And also, it's more permanent. And when it's more permanent, can you see the loop of like all the limiting mindsets I'm in around that are holding me in place and making me feel stuck about how to move on what to do in the garden. So to create the plan, I was like, I am feeling very stuck. And I talked with my husband and partner in life and in the garden, and we could see our way through to some things, but it also felt like a circular discussion. There was some stuckness happening there. Also, see previous statement about COVID running through the house. We were all tired. It was not our most creative, generative state of being. So the move I made was to ask for help. I thought, you know what? I'm part of this community, and I just purely by writing out, hey, friends in the community, I'm wondering if anyone else is feeling stuck. I'm feeling stuck. Here's how I can describe my stuckness. And I went back to it a few times because I thought, I don't want to seem like too much of a Debbie Downer because this is real. Um, but also I am feeling this way and I need to phone a friend, and in this case phone my gardening community. And I was met with like wonderful support. So from my short description, because I was, I think, wise enough that I thought we're not going to solve my my massive 5 acre, how do I plan for landscaping on the whole 5 acres in my community equivalent of a Slack group. uh so I said, okay, I'm not going to solve it here, but I'm describing it enough and saying, could we use this community call to talk about it, or maybe are others interested in having a call? And now there is going to be a Q&A call where we can all just talk about places where we're feeling stuck. What are we doing? Um, and I showed up, and I also thought, you know what? I looked at examples of what other people were doing because people in the community were posting their plans and what they were looking like. And one person had posted about just have it be rustic. Like, here's an example of a master gardener and how they have like very unbeautiful hand drawn sketches of what it could look like. And I thought, oh, a master gardener can have unbeautiful hand drawn sketches. Surely I could do something like that. And so that's what I did. I thought, let me now just like drop in and come up with my best thinking. And I did it two ways. One, I went back to what had worked for me in that week one, looking at, okay, I know where I'm coming from and lessons I've learned, but let me actually look on our property. And I printed out our survey of our land, and I took my 10-year-old's gel pens, and for every every year that we've lived here since 2018, and I just drew out what things we had changed. I'm actually going to pull it up here in front of me and read to you some of the examples of things that we've done. So in 2018, we moved here and we updated the cottage because there's 3 structures on the property for family life, and we extended the driveway. That was really the major extent of things happening physically on the property. In 2019, we started the build of our new home. I'll link to the New York Times article if you want to see what that looked like in practice. We drained the pond. We put in new electric. We put in LP. The electric and the gas line, those were liquid propane. That's what LP stands for. Those were all underground. And so there was a lot of digging and excavating underground throughout the property. Um, Again, that's not gardening, but that's real land works that were happening. Uh, in 2020, we moved into the house. COVID hit. We weren't finished. The house had no siding on it. We walked literally on planks to get into the house because there were no stairs. but it was absolutely comfortable to live in, and way more comfortable than the cottage we'd been living in before. Um, we added raised beds, so we looked at where on the property is not going to be disrupted, but with all the other construction we know still needs to happen. And so that's how we picked the location to put in raised beds, and we put them there. Our main septic failed. We we had to come up with a temporary solution and also figure out how to put in motion a longer term solution, all while the height of COVID is happening. Um, we got the stairs added, we got the siding added. We put in a gym in our basement, which has been, see previous statement about Peloton, game changing. Anyway, we did a lot of different things, and I could take you through the whole of this, but I won't. Point is, when I started looking year by year at all the things we've done, including already in this year, things that we've done on the property, it reminded me what a transformation we have already undergone. And even if you take our the actual homes on the property, my office building, the cottage, the house that we built, and you take those out on the land, we've done a lot of things giving back into the land. And we literally sowed oats to replenish soil. We have added in hardscaping. We've dug up so many rocks you can't even believe, and then we've used them, that people call them Catskills potatoes. Like, just put a shovel in the ground, you're going to find a rock. And we've built beds with them and trails with them. um, and so there's so much that we've done. And do you see how the energy in my voice is starting to change by looking at what we've done and celebrating it and looking at it as a whole and in detail, not just what are the lessons I've learned, but like, what have we actually done? Wow, I could feel the momentum and say, okay, well, like, we've done that. Where are we at now? Like, what's the plan for where we move, where we take things next? And it became clear to me, well, you know what I don't have, which is rare for the person who's built her career on guiding people to see what they want and how to get there. I don't have the technical expertise and the know-how. Like, I don't see the garden holistically. I'm like absolutely in my own way. I need the vision. And so that put me in motion in the present. I'm like, okay, so I'm going to find a design partner who can help me create the vision. And in the meantime, I know that that is realistically something that will maybe get accomplished, because I have to find that partner, and people are busy. And I know that urgency is not a great condition for visioning. And so I need spaciousness around when we get this done. So if we could grow a vision, a plan, a multi-year plan for what the garden could look like, I know that that will really help me. And if that's part of what we quote unquote garden this year, beautiful. Like, we'll grow that. And in the meantime, what can we do without that, or that's independent of that, this year? And then I sat down and said, okay, so in the present of the 2023 gardening season, what can I do? And that helped get me unstuck. So you see how, again, it's like I looked back, I dropped into a level of detail that helped me build momentum. I looked forward and said, oh, actually, like, I can't see, I'm getting all over the place. Where are these trees? And I I'm not feeling it. And without feeling the vision, I'm not going to move towards it. So I need support. I need someone to help me see something, so to help me get out of my own way. And I know I can do that. And that helped me come back to the present and say, okay, so what are the things I can do now? And now I'm in motion and it feels lovely. I'm unstuck. Lots of things are still unclear, lots of things to be figured out, but I'm not stuck. Feels great. That is my second story. Okay, quick memory, and I will link to this in the show notes, even though, typos and all. In the early days, I used to blog. Remember blogging? And I wanted to look up on the website. I actually don't have the blog public anymore, so you have to be someone who's savvy and listening to the podcast and hearing me mention it, and go to the show notes to see it. uh, but I looked up on the website to say, what have I written about Or have I even podcasted about being stuck? Because it's so core to what I do. I thought it's likely that I've done something with this in the past. So I looked, and sure enough, I had to chuckle. Back in 2016, I wrote a blog called Gardens and Getting Unstuck. And friends, I'm telling you, it's like I was in the exact same position, except I had just gone through the experience of hiring a firm in Washington, D.C., who I would highly recommend for anyone who's there, Loving Carrots. Um, and they had created a vision for our property there. And it's exactly what I'm looking for now. And I wrote this whole blog post about what have I learned about getting unstuck from this experience of gardening. And so I will tell you those 5 things in closing. But mostly I share this memory because I thought, you know what, history repeats itself. And so you watch out for that. Pay attention. Um, anyway, so here, just top line, and if you want to hear more about it, go check it out in the show notes. But my 5 tips for getting unstuck were: know thyself. Right, got to start with, what do you know about yourself? What's going to move you? 2, ask for help, just like I did this time with the Fresh Exchange community, and now reaching out to design partners. 3, gather distinctions. So being able to see what you're moving towards, like, are you looking for a vision versus are you looking for, is it a vision? Am I looking for what I want for perennials or for trees? Am I looking for a plant? Am I looking for what varietals to grow? So what are the distinctions I have? Gather distinctions. 4, set a vision, because we know when we can see it, we can move towards it. And 5, take small steps. Again, more details on that. And even you can see the garden plan I had for my last property, which is pretty stellar. We did not fully realize it because we didn't stay there long enough. But that was fine. And I just think it's really fun to um, see how things move, and to see how things repeat, and also to see how we can get unstuck. And that, dear listeners, is what I wanted to share with you today. I hope that you are listening and you are not stuck. But if you are, I hope you are finding inspiration. And because I know all of us get stuck sometimes, we manage people who are stuck, we lead teams who are stuck. I also hope and I trust that you will find some ways to translate these stories and memories into something that works for you. And I'll be here cheering for you, wanting to hear about what you're celebrating, wanting to hear about where you're stuck. Reach out, contact me through pointroadstudios.com. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I just did a post where I shared me skiing, so you can see a video of that if you're like really hooked on the ski content. You can see me in action. Um, but just know that I'm here believing in you, cheering for you, and holding my wildly powerful belief that animates me in all that I do and in my wishes for all of you and all that you do, that there is nothing stopping you. So please go on ahead and get after whatever it is that you really want.